We're on board Viking Polaris this week. This is Viking's latest expedition ship, one of two that they have. This ship holds 378 guests and spends the southern hemisphere summers in Antarctica. And in the northern hemisphere summers, it spends most of its time in the Great Lakes, and in 2025 will do the Northwest Passage. We're in the Great Lakes right now, and we've got an opportunity to take a look around the boat. I'm Bob Bradley from the Pampered Cruiser, and if you're planning a trip on Viking or any other small ship, ocean, river, or expedition cruise line, then we'd love to help you out. Here's our contact information, and it's also included in the notes below. In this video, we explore the Viking Polaris, one of two identical expedition vessels owned and operated by Viking Cruise Lines. This ship was built in 2022 and is a Polar Class 6 expedition vessel with 2 submarines and a fleet of Zodiac boats and kayaks to keep guests busy. At 30,000 tons with only 378 guests on board, there's a ton of public space. Let's start topside on deck 6. Those familiar with Viking River and Viking Ocean ships will know the Aquaview Terrace. Well, here on Polaris, the Aquaview Terrace is the whole back of the vessel. There's a couple of plunge pools and an indoor-outdoor pool. And because we're in the Great Lakes, both at Polaris and Octantis are here today, you'll see that anchored not far from us is Viking's other expedition ship. This is indoors in the Aquaview Terrace, so you can enter the pool here and then swim outdoors if you wish, if you're in cold weather. Or you can just sit up at the bar and have a cocktail if you prefer. And on nice days, this whole roof retracts back and you're in an outdoor space. So it's a solarium on some days and it's an outdoor space on others. The rest of deck 5 is all public space, and they all naturally flow from one end to the other. The back half of deck 5 is one of the places you go to eat on board Polaris. The World Cafe has both hot and cold buffets, and there's a grill where you can order burgers and steaks, as well as a few other goodies. Well, if sushi's your bag, there's of course lots of dining options on board Polaris, but if sushi's your bag, here it is. Every night in the afternoon and into the evening, you can have sushi fresh made right here. Well, if you need a carb fix, the bakery is also part of World Cafe. No shortage of baked goodies, bread, you name it, it's all here. Mamsen's is the Scandinavian Norwegian deli on board, and there's no denying the Hagen family's influence here. This whole area is modeled after the Hagen's grandmother's personal family kitchen. There is a ton of public space here on Polaris. This is called the living room, and there's entertainment in here at nights. There's a piano player. There's also tons of tiny little places where there's puzzles and board games and all kinds of things that you can do if you've got a sea day and you want to spend a bit of time on board the ship. The Explorer's Lounge is a familiar area for Viking River guests, and on the expedition vessels, it's on decks 4 and 5 at the very front of the vessel. It's a very comfortable space with lots of seating for nighttime entertainment. If you want to plan your next Viking cruise while you're on board the ship, there is a future cruise consultant on board, and you really do want to consider booking on board. They always make it worth your while to do so. This is Expedition Central. It's an atrium area in the middle of the ship on decks 1 and 2. And this is where you come for if you want to talk to the hotel staff or if you want to talk to some of the expedition team. This is where you come to meet them. There's a full-service fitness studio on board if you want to do yoga or perhaps lift some free weights. There's all kinds of things there. There's also some equipment in this next room over. Not a bad place to go for a run. This is the pool and spa area on deck number 2. And there's right outside this door is an outdoor hot tub. And then we've got all kinds of other little goodies here. There's a sauna. Over this way we have there's a steam room. There's the snow grotto where you go inside and you actually get snowed on. It's really quite cool. It's snowing on board Viking Polaris. This is the snow grotto if you want to come and get snowed on if you don't get enough of it when you're in Antarctica. Holy cow. And you can see in front of all of this is the indoor pool area with floor-to-ceiling windows that look out at whatever you're looking out at. There's an experience shower, which I guess could mean anything. There's the cold bucket shower, which is exactly what it sounds like. You get a bucket of cold water poured on you. And there's individual treatment rooms for if you want a spa treatment as well. This is the aula, which would be traditionally the theater on board many cruise ships, but here on the expedition ship, this is where the expedition team does their daily briefings. You can also watch them in your room if you prefer, but lots of folks come here to listen to the expedition team or to lectures that happen. And what makes this different than other theaters is, as you can see, it's completely open. There's 270-degree views in here to the outside. Now, they do pull down a screen here at times if there's and darken it up if the presentation would warrant that. But what a spectacular space to come and listen to a lecture. You can imagine how cool this would be with icebergs in Antarctica and penguins floating in the background. This is Fint's Terrace at the very back end of deck number 2. And Fint's is the Hagen family's personal dog, and they've actually got a paw print of him down here. You see him in some of the Viking videos that Corrine Hagen does. For the rest of us on board this ship, this is a great place to hang out on a nice day at the very aft of the ship. It's got a real yacht-type feel back here. Manfredi's is a signature specialty Italian restaurant on board. It's actually named after Manfredi Lefebvre, who was originally of Silversea and Sitmar Cruises fame, but he's a good friend of Tor Hagen's, and so the restaurant is named after him. Great for Italian food. You don't, there's no upcharge on Viking for specialty dining, but you do have to make a reservation ahead of time, and you'll find all your favorite Italian dishes here. If you wanted to do private dining, there is a small dining room that will accommodate 12 people. They use the menu from Manfredi's. But that's something you have to book once you get on board. Now, there's no upcharge again to do this, but it does sell out quickly because, of course, they can only accommodate 12 people every night. So if it's something you want to do, you'll want to inquire as soon as you get on board the ship to book the private dining room. The main restaurant on board Octantis and Polaris will feel very familiar to Viking clients. The dining room feels a lot like it does on the river ships. You have, much like the river ships, they also have one side of the menu that is set dining for the things you can get every night, and the other side that changes daily depending on where you are and what the chef's creation is that particular day. Again, you can make reservations here if you wish, or they do take walk-ups as well. This is the shelter at the very front of deck number 3, and you can imagine if you're in Antarctica, this would be not a bad place to hang out. So we're sort of half indoors and half outdoors here. The shelter, it's called for a pretty good reason. So lots of seats and cushions and whatnot. And then if you want to be completely exposed to the elements, you just come right out to the bow out front here. This is Mackinac Island in Michigan, but you can imagine if you're in Antarctica with all the icebergs and penguins and all that thing, you can come right out here to see them. This is the aptly named The Hide at the very front end of deck number 1. And it's kind of an interesting space. So again, at the very low on the very bow of the ship, and it's kind of got a almost like a wine cellar feel to it. But what they've done, which is quite interesting, is that you can imagine if the boat were traversing the Drake Passage, you could stand here when the waves are high, and with the waves crashing up against the vessel, you've even got handles here you can hang on. It's kind of a cool setup. One of the questions we most often get is, what is a Nordic balcony? We're in a Nordic balcony 3 on board Viking Polaris, and it's kind of an interesting concept because the space that a balcony takes up on a cruise ship is included in the square footage of the room. So because these expedition ships are often operating in inclement weather, if you had an exterior balcony, you might not actually use it a whole lot. So what they've done with the Nordic balcony is they've given you the benefits of an outside balcony, but makes that space usable indoors for when it's not quite as nice outdoors. So as you can see, it's a full sort of floor-to-ceiling glass windows. And if I want, I can, whoops, that's not what I want. Let's try this. So I can let it down just enough to let a little bit of air in, or we can take it all the way down so you actually would have the same effect that you would have on sitting on a balcony. And there's seating here and whatnot, so if you want to enjoy the fresh air, if you're in Antarctica. Today we're in Milwaukee and it's probably about 80 degrees out, so we're not getting the same effect as if we were in one of the polar regions. But as you can see, it's kind of a cool place if you just want to get a bit of fresh air, or if you want to grab your included binoculars and look out at all the various things. Or maybe have a glass of wine sitting here and looking out at icebergs and penguins. Finally, we get a lot of questions about the expedition facilities and equipment on board Viking Polaris and Octantis. And there's some really cool photos and footage of the submarines, special operation boats, Zodiacs, and kayaks. So I've put those into a separate video and inserted the link below. So here's a few of my impressions after traveling on Viking Polaris for a week. The first thing is the amount of public space. I didn't bother to go and count all the seats, but I can tell you that everywhere we went, whether it be a restaurant or a lounge or any of the public spaces, there was always tons of room. There was always a place to sit. The second thing is the word expedition itself. So that word tends to scare people a little bit, and you kind of understand why. They think that you have to be an Everest base climber to be welcome on a ship like this. And that was absolutely not the impression I got at all. I found most of the guests on Viking Polaris, or Octantis for that matter, to be people just like you and me. Most of the guests on my week aboard were in the 60 to 80-year-old age range, and some of them even had mobility aids. If you wanted to participate in the expedition activities, then the test is whether you can walk up 2 flights of stairs and get in and out of a bathtub unassisted, because a bathtub is actually somewhat like getting in and out of a kayak. The third thing that struck me is the Nordic balcony room itself. The square footage is listed on these rooms as being around 220 square feet, and it feels way bigger than that. It is probably the best engineered stateroom I've been on any ship anywhere. And finally, the Great Lakes. I'll post a separate video on that, but it actually pleasantly surprised me. I thought I would enjoy the itinerary, but I actually really enjoyed it. It was not only a great opportunity to check out the ship, but also to explore a little part of our own backyard here that we wouldn't have normally perhaps had the opportunity to do. If you're thinking about an Antarctica trip, this is a great way to take an expedition vessel for a bit of a test drive closer to home and not have to fly to the bottom of the world to figure out that maybe it's not quite right for you. If you enjoyed this video, then give us a like, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're considering a cruise on Viking or any other expedition, small ship, or river cruise line, then we'd love to help you out. Here's our contact information, and it's also included in the notes below. Thanks for watching.